This
Today's agenda is
conference will
going to
now
be
be recorded.
today's agenda is going to be Mohan will continue the discussion from last week. Last week we had a good discussion on um, some of the important items that we need to look for the metrics part and why we need to augment some of the PUEs and reasoning behind it. So we will continue the discussion. Mohan, you can get started.
Yeah, you need to give me rights, Sammy.
Yes. You should be able to
Just as I'm going to just fly by the slides. I'm not going to do it again. This is what we did last time, right? So we did, uh, various sustainability metrics, and I focused in on PUE and some of the problems with PUE, right? What's the role that this work group can play in tightening how PUE is measured and reported uh, going forward, right? So there's a lot of confusion on what folks say and what's the reality in general, right? Folks often mix static and dynamic, so it's hard to tell. And folks also say PUE when they really mean partial PUE. And the other thing I mentioned was as PUE approaches one, where do we go from here? And associated with that was as thermal solutions change, role of server power in PUE needs to be something that we reconsider because the way the track that we are on, so is a 2010 technology, so it doesn't really match with where we are today. So then I kind of walk you guys through a lot of this data here, and also when people say so this is where simplest of things can trip you up, right? When you say you measured power, so I was saying that there are three definitions to what measured power means in general, and which one of those is not very clear, and that makes a big difference to the accuracy of how you're reporting, and which ones, and just asking folks to say which one are you reporting is a big deal in terms of coming up with something that says PUE subscript L1, PUE subscript L2, PUE subscript L3 would go a long way. So, and then I talked about the IT load and what IT load, right? So one of the games that folks play is they know what time of the year that or time of the month, wherever they're calculating PUE, and at that point you can increase or decrease your IT load uh, to get a favorable PUE. So at what IT load are you measuring is another subscript that you need to come up with, right? So because the PUE calculated 100% utilization is much different than PUE calculated 40% utilization. So this body needs to be the one that defines what's average utilization, or at a minimum, what's the utilization that you want to be at. So that's kind of where, and I was, I think, just done through this table when we stopped last week. So now let me switch to PUE is very power focused metric. So the equivalent of that for carbon is CUE, carbon usage effectiveness, and that's essentially the total carbon uh, emissions by the data center by the total IT energy. So if you think about it, it is essentially, you can rewrite the equation as as the second line there, second row there, and that gives you total carbon emissions per kilowatt hour times total data center energy by total IT energy. So the second half of the equation in the middle is nothing but PUE. And the first portion of the equation right here where my cursor is, hopefully you can see my cursor, the total carbon emissions per kilowatt hour is nothing but carbon emissions factor. I'm glad that Deb's on the call, so she's very familiar with this concept, right? So this is the carbon emissions factor, which is dependent on nothing except your energy source, right? So if you use like a renewable energy, it's a much smaller number compared to something like coal or whatever, and then if it's a much higher number if you're using some fossil fuel. So this is, I mean, all the same things that I talked about for PUE apply. What I was saying, the reason I'm showing the derivation here is that everything I said about PUE applies here. Now that you can see the derivation, right? So CUE is just PUE hiding in some sense, right? So uh, how do you measure? So now see the carbon emissions itself. There are organizations who make it their job to basically publish the carbon emissions factor for a given state, for a given city, and so on. And it's time dependent, right? Like if you're sourcing from your city's power, for example, how much of it is green? When is it green? Uh, those are all heavily time dependent factors. And so, how do you average it? And how do you calculate it is something that again we'll have to specify. Otherwise, when whatever number you see is going to be subject to a lot of interpretation, right? And then of course there are folks that like the major tier one CSPs and factories, right, that buy uh, offsetted power, right, through the same grid. So even though uh, the the supplied utility power for everybody else may not be green, but they're buying green power. So the same what time-based power may not apply to them. So there is lots of work to be done here. Uh, the other thing with both PUE and CUE is that they are rooted in the past. So these days, there is such a thing as recovered energy recovery, right? So the side effect of data center is heat, and these days there is a lot of heat recovery options to reuse that heat. There is no credit given for reusing that heat in PUE or CUE. So in some sense, it's not a fair metric, right? Because it just penalizes you regardless of what you do. So this is just uh, this is just my terminology for so doesn't have to stick to these acronyms, but I was just saying that the data center energy needs to subtract out the recovered energy, right? Otherwise, it's not a fair way to say you used up so much. You really didn't use up that much because you recovered a portion of that energy that you used. And then that ratio is really what we need to be comparing ourselves to if you want to look at a, a fair comparison going into the future. Um, so that's at the macro level. At the system level, so if since PUE, at least for like you know the new types of thermal solutions and some of the hyperscale tier one type data centers is already approaching sub 1.1. Uh, so, and that's almost one, right? So then the question is, where do we go? And so then if you look a little bit inside the server itself, the server has three things, right? There is the CPU, memory, drives, network, whatever, right? That's what you would think of as the IT uh, hardware complex inside the server. And then uh, And then you have power converters. Maybe you have your own power supply, maybe you don't, right? In which case you have a bunch of voltage regulators. Essentially, what I'm saying is that you supply a certain amount of power, and the actual power that goes to your electronics is much less than that because there are voltage regulator losses uh, in the path. And then you have local cooling, right? And the cooling maybe fans typically, right? And today on a given server, the fans are about 10% of your server load. Uh, so if you take this at a server level and define a new metric that says uh, you put in uh, so the incoming power into your server, right, at the wall plug, whatever the quote unquote wall plug, right, and then the total computational energy that you used up, that ratio, that tells you the overhead that essentially that you incur because it uh, it essentially subtracts out the thermal energy and the power conversion losses, the thermal losses and the power conversion losses out of the equation. And overall goal should be to get to a place where both of them go. So again, if you want IU to go to one, then you need to get to a place where those are the losses are nearly zero. So for example, if you go with immersion cooling, then uh, your thermal losses are, there is no fan, so essentially uh, your thermal losses are pretty much zero. So the only thing you're dealing with is the power conversion losses. So it may be a better metric. Not that this is the only metric, but I'm just saying this may be a better metric in terms of measuring. And again, the systems are going to get disaggregated. There is a different group some of you are part of, where we are looking at disaggregated systems at OCP. And so from that standpoint also, it might be better for us to think of uh, utilization from a sustainability standpoint uh, this way in terms of power coming in versus power that's usefully was spent computing. Uh, and and stand up that metric as opposed to the metric that we have again that comes from 2007 when the unit of compute was uh, a data center, right? So they were trying to look at a data center level losses. But feel free to stop me. I mean, I'm just going to go through some of the concepts that I wanted you folks to consider. Uh, Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Uh, I know it's almost like a grab bag, but I just wanted to throw all the concepts here on the various things that this forum needs to go touch. So if your questions stop me, otherwise I'll just keep going. The other problem is if you look at everything that exists, PUE and so on, they're heavily compute oriented metrics, right? So if you look at like a networking switch, which is a substantial portion of any data center, the only way that you can think of computing anything from a networking standpoint would be a partial PUE, which essentially says, I put in this much energy into the data center, and this is the amount of energy that went into my networking hardware, right? So that's one way you can do that. This is within the confines of today's PUE definition. You could do that, but even this doesn't. Nobody has formalized it. So for the most part, other than being lumped together in some rack, there is no way for us to talk about efficiency of the network. Uh, Network switches are at such a uh, early stage, they don't even stop transmitting when they have nothing to do. They are still continue to chatter and consume energy. So all the things that everyone here has known for the last 15 years, like your laptop, has called dynamic voltage and frequency scaling and so on. None of those exist for a network, right? It's so when I was in school, my professor used to say that there were days when you could solve a partial differential equation and get a PhD. So this is the equivalent of that days for networking, at least from a sustainability standpoint.
So Mohan, on the previous, the network side, do you only consider the switch, or do you also consider the NIC that goes into the compute side?
The NIC is already part of your the IUE calculation I showed. So I'm just talking about all the switches that are there and how they're managed. Like the switch silicon does no uh, attempt to save power of any kind. So so it's a so so if you just take a look at the L1 and L2 switches and the core switches in your data center, and you try to ask what do I do if I want to talk about sustainability of those guys, then we really are at a loss on how to characterize them. So I'm just trying to say one option is we can say partial PUE, and then I'm going to propose another one.
Okay, thank you.
Right. But then this is a very this is extremely data center oriented view of the world, right? Because network folks don't think like this. They in terms of energy. So the other option is to think about it in terms of uh, how much energy did my switch need, and how many bytes did I move, right? Sorry, I kind of repeated it multiple times there. I didn't mean to. I was struggling with writing equations and in PowerPoint. That's all it was. Uh, so so how how much energy did I move per byte? How much energy did it take to move per byte? And if you take it to the highest level, then you can talk about uh, how many kilowatt hours did it consume for a gigabyte, right? And maybe that's the kind of metrics that we need to stand up to measure the efficiency of these things, right? Again, you don't have to take this as the proposal. I'm just saying that there is a gap, and uh, I'm not the networking expert. I would say this, and I've already pitched this to some of the networking companies, and they would be coming in fact, to talk about networking at the sustainability meeting, and maybe they have a better insight. I'm just saying that we need a metric because our metrics do not carry forward into it in general. Uh, so so then finally, if you think of data center usage effectiveness, uh, now we can essentially rewrite that as PUE times the other metric at the system level that I was proposing, which is the infrastructure usage effectiveness. Uh, so that may be another way to think of both metrics as essentially so we're not trying to replace existing metrics, we're just trying to complement them with new things that add on, so we have more ways to think about the world as one or more of like PUE kind of saturates it asymptotically at 1.03 or oh 07 or wherever the world is trying to land on it. Ignore the last comment. I can talk to you about it later. So the PUE generally does have this problem where lowering the IT uh, lowering the IT load has a weird effect on it, but uh, there are other ways to solve this. So I'm not going to worry about it for today. Uh, and oh, sorry, this is a different one. So yeah, we already talked about this energy usage effectiveness part, which is the total energy uh, minus the reused energy. So if there is no reused energy, then it defaults back to PUE. But in absence of any uh, in absence of any uh, reused energy, it looks like PUE. But if there is reused energy, then it looks very much like a different metric that you need to have to give account for things that are there. for the new data centers that are doing heat recapture.
So, Mo, do you also have another view on like for the how do you want to handle the storage, as well as if you are going to get a compute from remote data center, right? Even can be storage can be in remote instead of local, right? How do you want to account for that?
Um, like storage meaning like hard drives and SSDs. That's what you're talking about,
Right,
Sammy?
right. Like finally, you end up storing the data. The data could be locally stored, or locally within the data center, or remotely to the data center, right?
I think, Simi, are you bringing up like Amazon S3 or
Right,
Azure Blob Storage?
right.
Yeah, I do think we should have that. Just similarly to how we have the networking piece, I think also the that storage piece, like the S3.
Yeah. If it's remote, it wouldn't be part of your problem, right, Sammy?
Oh
It's just
no, it's
yeah,
in the data center. It's just not in the
yeah,
compute rack.
yeah, yeah. So just like I was proposing, total energy to switch by per total bytes mode. So it'll be total energy for total bytes stored. Right, that's what you're looking at, right? Or total bytes accessed, I guess.
Right. A lot of times people look from like a IOPS point of view for
Yeah,
storage.
exactly. That's what IOPS is. IOPS is
We
essentially
have Shruti here. Shruti, if you want, you know more about this than I do, if you want to pipe in.
Yeah, hi Deb. Uh, yeah, I was thinking basically like when you raise the storage thing, per like total energy per IOPS is good, but then the IOPS also depends upon the access page size. So I was just wondering how do we incorporate that? Because as I'm changing what is the access size, the IOPS are also changing, and that will make this unit change.
exactly right, because IOPS itself used to be 4K. Now they're much bigger than 4K. So same kind of standardization has to be brought in, so people don't game the system essentially. What it is.
But certainly like something on the storage side would be helpful, so we can think more about that.
Thank you. I think we should account that. And also, I was thinking maybe additionally, if you have MI or that you going to have a learning maybe outside the data center, like I don't know what is the new service is going to be named, but you could send the data out and get it trained and come back, right?
Yeah.
The model.
Yeah, so there is a lot to be done, and also I kind of stopped at today at focused on computing. Uh, there is since this is a metrics forum, at some point we should also talk about other metrics uh, that have similar issues like water utilization, GWP, and so on. But since they have very little to do with compute, I didn't bring them in today, but we can talk about them also to be comprehensive. Right. Again, similar problems exist. They were all defined, in the 2007 to 2010 timeframe, when the technology was much different, or I should say, the infrastructure capabilities were much different. So things have changed. So and that's not comprehended anywhere.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other viewpoints from the team here?
Is our vision that, so I'm coming from the standpoint of the embodied carbon work group, right, where we're trying to put an API, software API, that then goes to various databases where people have stored information, and so people can, users or others can access that information. Is that part of the vision here, or are we just leaving it up to people to adopt these metrics and, um, share them when and if they feel like it?
Yeah, I think what we want first to identify what is we want to measure it, right? I think we need to agree on a metrics. What are the things going to contribute to that metrics, right? Then once we align on that, what we want to do that we want to enable that. How are we going to measure that metrics, right? Which may require some additional handling in compute or management side to measure that information, so that holistically you have a capability available within the node or within the rack. So you can say within the data center, you can say that you have a mechanism to collect the information. Once that collection can be done, then you want to have some mechanism to report that aggregated mechanism. Even that, I think we need to align or agree on what is that mechanism need to look like. Once we have the alignment, then we have to go back and say like the new metrics, you need to include this additional information that we are looking for as a general publication, whether it's a quarterly or a yearly. That again, we need to define that.
So
Does it
the
answer your question?
Yeah, I think you kind of laid out a vision over time. I did just want to throw out that the EU has regulations going into effect pretty soon. We may want to look and see how we're aligned with those, just because that's something that, from a regulatory point of view, folks are going to be having, must execute on. Would be somewhere I have a table of that. I'll go see if I can pull it out, share it with folks.
Is that more concrete number that need to be reported as a public number? Deb?
So there's been a lot of debate on this, and I'm not really sure where it landed. For sure, if you have a data center of a certain size, so if you just have like 3 servers in a closet, you're exempt, right? But if you have a data center of any reasonable size, you would need to measure and report to some governmental agency. Now, whether you would also make that publicly available, or whether the government would make it publicly available, or the government would aggregate it and make the aggregation available, that is not yet clear. But definitely would need to report to some EU agency on an annual basis. So my point is that if we can get aligned with something that's regulatory or whatever, then we know it's going to happen. So that, that just automatically gives some momentum, at least in that geography.
Yeah, I think we probably need to start harvesting that kind of information, what is generally required. And I believe after, some of the discussion is trending towards, so we do need first to define the mechanics needed. Then I agree with you, we need to align on finally what need to be reported out, right? So internally, you need to have
Yeah, I mean, the thing
You want
is
to
that
report it out.
they've moved ahead, right? The EU has moved ahead with something. I'm trying to find the picture,
Okay.
trying to refresh my memory on what they decided on. So, you know, we would have to see what that is and see then what we can do to try to, you know, incentivize them to improve it closer to what we're interested in.
Right.
But in the meantime, it would be good to know what's definitely, you know, going to be happening.
I think also the another good point is in order to in that matrix, what you're saying, and EU is required to report is that all the measurements already available in the existing definition, or do we need to add something new, not even to meet those definitions, right?
Yeah.
It'll be good if there is a, I know it's outside requirement, but how is it going to be attained inside the data center, right? I think that we need to develop if it's not already developed. If it is already developed, we need to look at it and review that.
So I found it.
If you have the information you want to certainly I can promote you. Anyway, you are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you are
So
also
I'm gonna look at it together.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me see to remember. Share. All right. So where did it go? So let's see here. Somehow. Okay. So anybody feel free to. So they have the total power capacity. They do go for PUE, renewable energy factor, some sort of efficiency thing, some sort of utilization. They do have an energy reuse factor, cooling efficiency, carbon usage effectiveness, and they do list out all these standards as well. So, yeah, I do not know where these standards are available, but perhaps I could poke around and see. So we would at least know this is a starting point where a large number of data centers are going to be. Oh, and you can actually, if you look at the bottom, there's an asterisk for what's required, which looks like all of these things, basically. Let's see what some of the other stuff is. Ah, they also have some
So
other.
looks like you have something on energy efficiency.
Well, they have PUE. They have energy efficiency, sorry, for servers. They do. So this is an annual reporting, right? So it's not like on a hour by hour basis, right? It has to be reported annually. So if you would like, I can take that action item to try to find. I can mail these this set of slides. I think actually I just saw something come through my inbox that was updated, so I'll see maybe it's updated. I can mail these around. I can also take the action item to try to find where all these standards exist and try to just make a a quick, guide to all of these existing standards.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see that the ITA equipment energy efficiency, what are they including there? And
Yeah,
if
exactly.
there's 4.4 and 4.5, right? I think there is a time T component, and you need to understand what are they including within that measurement, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It though looks like their IT equipment energy efficiency is it's a different approach than what we discussed. That it is just the peak performance by peak power versus trying to get rid of the energy that got used for maybe power conversion losses, etc.
Well,
Not
but
doing that.
Shruti, if you look about halfway, there is an energy reuse factor.
Mm.
So they're asking for things to be broken out, but then you can use that breakout to perhaps get to a lot of what Mohan is proposing. But like definitely one gap we see here is they just say PUE. We have to go look at the standard and say, is that PUE? I don't remember what Mohan called it, 1, 2, 3 or ABC, right? We'll go see what that standard exactly says. And likewise for a lot of these other things. So like I said, I will gladly take the AR to try to find these EN blah, blah, blah standards, just so that at least we know what people will, a significant number of data centers across the EU will already be required to be figuring out on an annual basis. And I think if we use that as our starting point, rather than saying, oh, and here OCP comes with yet something else, right? I just think we'll have much more momentum if we start with what a lot of people already, from a regulatory point of view, have to be figuring out.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I think.
yeah.
Good, Shruti. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think what I was also trying to say is some of the things Mohan pointed out was the static calculation is done. I think mapping out this numbers on standard and calling it out, right? This is currently like it's calling for static. We are looking for a dynamic. It's basically like what is really going to be consumed versus paperwork to represent this information, right? With this specific numbers, then we can really say like this is a current mechanism, but we want to drive is something new, right? We want to put those EU numbers underneath, right? Yeah, it'll be helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Don't remember how to drop off here. Maybe this is, or even stop sharing. Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any? If not, I think there's another thing I would like to want to make sure that we kind of start layering on what are the things, how do we address to solve the problem, right? If you want to first spend time on IT energy versus non-IT energy, right? We need to start thinking about what we really want to include, but we want to exclude, right? I think as a team, aligning on that specific will be helpful. At least we can put some draft and we can start enhancing going further, right? Any thoughts on what we really want to include or exclude in the IT versus non-IT energy? Some of things to kind of, if you look at moment sphere, right? We want to include CPU or GPUs, memory, and any of the local storage related items, maybe it includes any BMC related items for this compute side. And we want that is under compute IT compute umbrella, and we want to put all the fan and all the VRs or any power related things, cooling related things outside the non-IT energy. Once I'm kind of trying to see from this team, what do you guys think? How do you want to approach in solving the specifics there?
So the network switch energy, like in your suggestion, is still in the IT equipment energy, right?
We want to include the network as part of the IP equipment, but as someone pointed out, in the network itself, there's two components, right? There is a real network portion of it, and there's a cooling and other things. It's non-network portion of it, right?
Mhm.
And also, I think he pointed out, are we giving incentive for doing a power management versus not doing a power management, right? You can, all the network can be always consuming the max power, even though it's not really sending traffic through, right?
Right.
If
Okay.
you want to give incentive, then we need to say like, yes, this is a 50% workload. We want to include this number. But if you have a high or low, then you can have a different numbers, right? We want to how we want to include that in our part of the definition, right? We need to think through that.
Mhm.
So for the next week, so Jeff, also you also want to bring in the what is available or the power measurement related items in the rate phase definition, right?
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether you can bring it in next week. If Dev also he can bring in some of the definitions on the EU, we could probably go through those two items.
Yeah, and I want to talk about water utilization and global warming potential definitions also, Sammy, but it's so different from power that I don't want to talk about them in the same meeting because it'll be very confusing. So if you give me like 10 minutes, I can also go through similar issues that exist, right? So the opportunities for this forum in those other metrics.
Okay, Mohan, yeah. I'm trying
And
to
then you
kind
guys
of address
decide
to
what scope you want to have. Yeah, you guys decide what scope. I mean, as you saw from what I presented today and last week, you have enough scope just with these metrics without taking on things that are a little bit not in the IT scope per se. But I mean, it's still data center scope, but I don't know how much you want to go, worry about how water consumption is defined and so on. But for completeness, I can cover it, and then you guys can decide which ones you want to focus on first versus which ones you want to not focus on at all, and just point on to other themes.
I think
Um,
that's also another good point.
For
Good.
global warming potential, wouldn't we just follow the GHG protocol there?
I know, but just like I showed you, PUE is prone to interpretation. GWP is prone to interpretation on how you report. So I can give you a very favorable number by just measuring it on the way I would like to measure it. Right. So the two measurements on global warming, GWP reported, are not comparable because you don't know what methodology was used.
I would love to learn more about that. I did not realize that the GHG protocol leaves a lot of wiggle room there. So, yeah, I would really like to see that next meeting.
Yeah, I won't consume. I'll just put the problem statement because I have a feeling, given the constituency of this forum, you guys are more in the problems that are presented so far camp, so which is fine. But I just for completeness, I want to just throw everything at it.
Just fine. Yeah, we will put in the agenda for you to go through that also more. And also, if anybody else have any additional metrics related things that we should consider, let us also include in the discussion. That way we can at least get that viewpoint of what are the things we need to consider before we go and start driving to the solving the problem, right?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, I know, Mohan, you said you'll be going into it next week. But when you're saying the difference in GWP, are you thinking of differences in the LCA methodology that leads to differences in the GWP?
No. Like for example, you can say, GWP was measured over. I mean, some particular chemical impact may be 50 years life cycle. Somebody's life cycle, it could be 100-year life cycle. You can't tell, but there are other ways to calculate GWP and essentially say, here is my GWP, but what's the impact on the environment is not always clear from looking at that number, because you don't know what the basis that was used.
Okay, yeah, I get the 50 and 100 year would make a difference. Okay. Okay.
So for next week, Manu, we will. So how much time, Manu, you need
Yeah,
for the?
just give me
10.
10 minutes. But, I mean, just because I'm pretty sure, other than just as a round out the whole thing, that's probably not what you guys want to do. But let me just finish it off on those topics, and then you can get into whatever you want to go solve in general.
So, and Dave, on the U related items that adds detail, how much time you would be needing next week?
Excuse me? Do you want to know how long I need on the
Yeah,
agenda?
correct.
Yeah, because I haven't started to look at all, I'm a little uncertain to say. So maybe if we can do Mohan and Jeff, I'll take whatever time is left over, and then if need be, we can continue in the subsequent meeting. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm trying to kind of, given we have 5 more minutes, I thought like we'll plan for the next week also.
Yeah. It would be super helpful to me if you could like say where the minutes are kept and the agendas, if you could send a link, and also, if somebody wants to send an email to the whole team, how you would go about doing that. You don't have to do that live now, but if you could send that an email afterwards, that would be good.
I will do that.
There is a group mailing list, right?
There is a. Right.
And that works because I
I will
tried
send you
for
that.
another group we're in, and I think it went into the big bit bucket in the sky, but it works for this group. I'll try.
I
I'll
have
try
not
to
tried.
find it. I'll report
Fully.
back. You'll either get the email from me or I'll tell Sammy it looks like it went to the Bitbucket.
I'm receiving all the subscription list and all the notification. I'm sending it out to the thing in my email, the OCP one. But I have not really tried sending messages out. I will try this week with this minutes and recording post, so at least we can get started there.
Excellent.
And Jeff, how much time you would need for the existing power related?
I mean, it's probably not that long. Probably, I mean, 10 or 15 minutes is probably enough.
Okay. And you can able to have the discussion next week, Jeff?
Sure.
Okay. Then I will put you for 15 minutes.
Okay.
Then I'm on for 10, so it's 25 minutes. Then we can have some open discussion as well as tips info next week for discussion.
Sounds good.
As long as I get more time than Mohan, that's all I care about.
We can give you more time for Mohan, yes. Yeah, obviously, all of you, if you can have additional discussion, then we will definitely go further, right? Mohan says he's giving 10 minutes for him to present, but all of us, we can ask additional questions and definitely it'll go to more time. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Have a good week.
And I think after this, I think what we want to start discussing is we need to identify which areas we want to solve the problem first, define, expand further. Start thinking about it, right? From the last 2 weeks discussion, right? There are multiple areas that we need to start aligning.
Yep.
First, I think it'll be good we can prioritize which one we want to go after as a team. Then we can put some energy behind that to kind of see like how do we solve that problem, right?
Yeah.
So there, what I can see from Mohan's presentation, right? He has like 10 or 15 different angles that we can, the areas that we need to start looking into that, right? We need to, as a team, let's prioritize and define next week or following week if we have time to select few areas that we want to go after.
Yeah, I think it's very important, as Mohan brought up, that I think most of us are on the IT side have been very focused on power and energy measurement, because I think that clearly is our biggest contribution to the party here.
Yeah.
But there are other measurements that not related to power and energy that I think would be really good in terms of the more the larger sustainability effort, as opposed to just carbon reduction, or at least carbon use phase reduction. So like the water consumption pieces from some of the IT gear, and then being able to account for heat reuse. I know the liquid cooling folks are big on wanting to make sure that can be accounted for, so that since you can get the credit for for heat reuse as opposed to just being a thermal load.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, team. We are almost on the top of the hour. I will talk to you next week.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Amy.
Good. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sam. Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.